Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this talk. I'm Nidhi Rastogi, and today I'll be presenting a research work titled MALOnt, an ontology for malware threat intelligence. This work is in collaboration with researchers at RPI and IBM. So I start by going over the research problem and critiquing current solutions that address malware-related research, especially focusing on ontologies and their application. This is followed by research challenges that MALOnt, the malware ontology that we are proposing, it addresses. I touch upon the current and future plans of creating knowledge graphs generated for gathering threat intelligence and the entailing future work. So, malware attacks impact every industry that is enabled by the internet technology, and approximately 7.2 billion malware attacks were reported worldwide in 2019. For preventing and detecting future attacks, whether they are similar to the already detected ones or disparate, the collection, integration, and analysis of malware threat intelligence is really crucial. When a malware attack occurs, or when a software vulnerability is identified and addresses or addressed, a detailed account of these actions are captured by researchers and security analysts in threat reports. These threat reports are technical in nature and cover information like vulnerability exploited, modus operandi, uh, the group responsible, or even individual cybercriminals who are responsible, and so on. So the question here is, how can an ontology help with this? So let's talk about what an ontology means. An ontology, it acts as a blueprint of a specific domain, like cybersecurity in our case, and it contains a few key concepts called classes, and the properties of the classes are called relationships and attributes. For example, in this figure that you see in front of you, malware and location are name of classes, whereas has target, uses Trojan are name of properties. This form of representation of domain data can facilitate the aggregation, representation, and sharing of threat information, which would otherwise be challenging to reproduce or to reuse and then to analyze at a large scale. And we also need to make sure that both human and software agents can use an ontology to understand the structure of information that is stored in a document, like the threat reports, and it could even be in the format of a report, a blog, a tweet, and it could either be written in a structured format, semi-structured, or unstructured format. And the prior work that we that surfaced during our investigations, which were attempted by researchers such as Schwimmer, Stucco, they expressed limited features. And another ontology, the Unified Cyber Ontology, or UCO, to the best of our knowledge, it is not publicly available, and it also has much broader scope when compared to MALOnt. There exist taxonomies as well, in addition to the ontologies that we visited in the previous slides. And the taxonomies or standards are mentioned in this slide, um, the limitation of these are they cannot parse multitude of threat advisory information and present it in a meaningful, human readable, actionable format that can be used by AI models for prediction or analyses. And due to the big data available in cyber threat landscape, what our research strives to do is to create information extraction techniques that can perform automated analyses. It can enable reasoning, can enhance inference capabilities with minimal human intervention. And this feature is currently lacking in the available standards slash ontologies. Therefore, what we are proposing is the use of web ontology language, or OWL, as the language for malware threat knowledge representation and analyses. The main contribution of this paper is MALOnt, an open source malware ontology, which underpins the collection of malware threat intelligence from disparate online sources. Concepts such as malware characteristics or attack and attacker details, all of these are covered under MALOnt. This serves as a foundation to create knowledge graphs, and what knowledge graphs are, they are a representation of a collection of interlinked description of entities, real world objects, events, situations, or abstract concepts. So let me explain this with an example. So there are three classes that have been defined in MALOnt, amongst others, and these three classes are malware, location, and attacker group, which largely describe a malware's behavior. So therefore, these were chosen as the top classes. This can be vetted with the attack or vulnerability details captured in few relevant threat reports, just to make sure that there is some relevance to these classes. The malware class has two subclasses, Trojan horse and dropper. A property like hash target location exists where the domain is determined by the malware class and range by the location class. To build an ontology, three main approaches are recommended, while also engaging human expertise to build them. Designing and developing an ontology is an agile process, and that's what we discovered during MALOnt, building of MALOnt. So there are essentially three stages were continuously visited while we were building MALOnt and reviewed based on core competency questions. These questions are available in front of you and also in the paper. So reviewing threat reports, identifying classes, hierarchy, data properties, and evaluating existing security ontologies, all of these stages were continuously visited. The middle out approach, there are three types of approaches. This was the most appropriate one, was used to create ontology and it basically covers the first two stages that I just mentioned. For MALOnt, many top-level classes were created with hierarchy. So there's a main class, top class, and there are subclasses as we visited in the previous slides. And then there are data properties to these classes, which are abstracted from the threat reports. Instances were created for these classes by capturing individuals from threat reports. So what this basically means is that we manually annotated those threat reports, and during the annotations, what was annotated was classified under some class, and identifying those classes is basically called instantiation. In the rest of the work, we used examples to describe the middle out approach. So before creating an ontology, its requirements should be gathered, before. So you need to be able to scope the requirement of the ontology. And how is that done is by answering some relevant competency questions, and that's why we need competency questions. Having these questions actually acts like a North Star when identifying pertinent classes and properties for proper coverage of the domain. And that's why these competency questions are written in front of you. So let's look at MALOnt evaluation now. MALOnt was evaluated by goal modeling approach, or more simply by running Sparkle queries for specific use cases of the competency questions. This is a standard way in the ontology world to basically evaluate if the ontology serves the purpose or the main requirements for creating it. And it is a very effective evaluation technique to test the adaptability and consistency of an ontology. So if the Sparkle query successfully extracts instances as a response, it signifies that the competency questions have succeeded in covering the defined goal of the ontology. And you can see a specific example in front of you where the competency question is there, and then there's a Sparkle query, associate Sparkle query for it. And then we were able to successfully generate instances by running this query. The ontology the MALOnt was used to annotate threat reports, as I've mentioned. And these threat reports were written between 2006 and 2020, annotating different kinds of reports in the corpus also allows for a deeper and wider range of details on a particular malware attack. So the more we are able to annotate, the more diverse information we are able to capture about different malware attacks. So the annotated values are then assigned to instances of MALOnt classes. So each class has assigned instances and properties, which eventually leads to creation of knowledge graphs. And a snippet is given right in front of you. And it's what it does is depicts the modeling of threat data collected from reports using classes and properties from the MALOnt ontology. For future direction, we will continue with the manual annotation with more experts joining our team. And we want to have a large enough training corpus which has enough diversity, or at least is representative of the kind of malware attacks that occur in the wild, which will be followed by knowledge graph generation using an automation approach that we are currently working on. This will help us build a large enough knowledge graph, that will contain triples for majority of the threat cases. And at this point, I'd like to acknowledge the research grant which supported our work, as well as the people who have, although are not the authors, but have substantially helped us in creating MALOnt. So thank you very much.